When we get into an MMO, we end up playing it for what? Dozens of hours? Hundreds of hours? Even more. And that means when it comes to looking at new MMOs, we've all been there. We see a new MMO, our interest is piqued, and then we think, yeah, but it's not World of Warcraft, it's not Final Fantasy. Do people really play that game? How many? Are there frequent updates? Will I be investing my time in a game that can go the distance? And I've always been concerned about that when it came to Guild Wars 2. I saw the cool mounts, I saw the novel approach to endgame design, but then I just kind of thought, I never hear about that game. Never see it advertised or talked about. I heard there was quite a fall off after its launch, so why would I bother putting my time into a game that's just going to peter out? And then looking at their yearly revenue chart, I almost felt like I had data to back that feeling up with. That's an understandable fear. How many people hopped on to Bless, BDO, ArcAge, or any other MMOs, only to end up feeling just a little bit burnt? MMOs just have that thing where they pull us back to the safe and the familiar because at least then we don't feel like our time will be wasted. So is Guild Wars 2 healthy? Can it go the distance? That's what I wanted to find out, and just in time for that, they have released a massive update on the future of Guild Wars 2, plus a content roadmap, so there's actually quite a lot to get into. This is Guild Wars 2's quarterly revenue, a downward trend, but with spikes for the big releases. Well, let's add in Q4 2021's 22,000 million won revenue. When you do that, you actually see a trend. Revenue has been increasing. So does that mean the game is getting more healthy? From a business perspective, yes. And that means it's time to turn to the Future of Guild Wars 2 blog post that ArenaNet made. And in that post, they say that their player counts have more than doubled in the last 3 years, and that End of Dragons has actually outsold Path of Fire, the previous expansion. Now, the player count doubling over the last 3 years, I think isn't fully reflected in their revenue, but at least the revenue trends are good. 2019 brought in 59 billion won, 2020 61 billion won, and 2021 managed to perform a good bit better, 74 billion won. By the way, this is in Korean won because NCSoft is a South Korean publisher, even though Guild Wars 2 is of course a NA studio. So what can we tell from this then? Well, first, revenue going up is a good sign for the health of this game. Second, player counts may have over doubled, but revenue certainly has not. Now, Guild Wars 2 is primarily monetized via quality of life upgrades and cosmetics, which I think will just appeal to the more dedicated, invested players. Plus, there are some things that probably helped inflate their player count. A good example is a pretty decent edition of the game was just on Prime Gaming in 2021. So it could take a while for that newbie influx to start converting. And more importantly, this timeframe represents them winning some of their audience back. Basically, Path of Fire was pretty good, but it had quite the drought of content. There was 5 years before Path of Fire and the new expansion, End of Dragons. That's a bit crazy. And it took ArenaNet having a big project cancelled and a lot of layoffs to seemingly spur them onto refocusing on Guild Wars 2. So what we now see is that Guild Wars 2 is their priority. We see that Guild Wars 2 has increasing revenue and that its latest expansion outsold the previous one. So if I am trying to be a sensible MMO gamer, I'm thinking these are all pretty good indicators of health. Guild Wars 2, with its free-to-play base experience, is actually coming to Steam, and I think we can therefore expect it to pick up a lot of new players. Now, rather than push Steam out with the expansion, they've instead decided to hold it off until they've patched up the new player experience, taken DirectX 11 support out of beta, and that they're just properly ready to launch. Now, that's definitely good stuff. From a technical perspective, you can see that there's a few neat things they can do in their engine, but oh boy, it doesn't always perform as good as it really should, let's just say. Now, of course, not being in Steam, that's no biggie for us MMO people who are used to having 500 billion launchers, but no doubt it will be good for the game's health and it will open up a new audience. I think that's enough to again increase our confidence level in the game, given the already positive trend. So, with the game talked about as a product, let's actually see what the future holds for the game itself. Guild Wars 2 has, at times, suffered from pretty major content cadence problems. ArenaNet are saying that they're keen to not let this happen again, so before diving into detail, they basically said that their focus is on consistent updates and then being able to run their team at a marathon pace rather than a sprinting pace, and that they're basically working out how to run the company to support that kind of development. So that all sounds good, but I mean, intent is fine. What matters is what is actually happening, and they've announced some things there. First, old content. So Living World Season 1, which was only available like years and years and years ago, that's actually returning across 5 episodes that they're going to drop throughout 2022. Now, this is designed to take you from your 1 through 80 level up story straight into the main sort of max level story of Guild Wars 2, which happens between the expansions and the Living World seasons. Living World is a strange thing. Basically, it's kind of like patches, and if they come out while you're playing the game, you get them for free. If you join the game afterward, you've got to pay for them. It's a very strange part of their business model, to be honest. I think plenty of the Guild Wars community are kind of down on that, to be honest, and I think rightly so. I can understand why. But one of the issues is that Living World Season 1 was just not available. So it was a big black hole. You know, people couldn't get into that story easy. Well, Episode 1 releases April 19th, and the final episode is going to have a strike mission and a challenge mode. Now, strike missions are a new-ish thing. They're essentially like FF14 trials. It's just like a boss for a group to fight instanced, and they're a new thing as of Icebrood's Saga, which was the set of Living World updates that dropped before the End of Dragons expansion. And actually, this was decently important to my decision. I always thought that the endgame content that I was pretty interested in, based on the other MMOs that I played, was a bit lackluster in Guild Wars 2. So having these strike missions, I think, is rounding out something that I would at least enjoy in that endgame experience. Now, unlike the other Living World stuff, this Season 1 sort of redo, relaunch, repackaging, it's free forever for everybody, which is definitely good. But that's old stuff. Well, what about the new content? Well, alongside polishing work, they are adding the first of 4 new strike missions on April 19th, and then also on May 24th, legendary weapon variant stuff. Legendary weapons, basically, hey, big grind, got a legendary weapon, that's kind of the shtick with them. And then, of course, they're also working on their next story update. So that all sounds good enough. I will say, I don't expect humongous quantities of content for a game like this, as compared to, say, Final Fantasy XIV. It has the sub fee, they're very much just, they've been doing this for so long, they've just been hitting, a patch every 3 or 4 months, or 3.5 or 4 months. So I wouldn't expect that cadence with Guild Wars 2, but at least for a newer player, that shouldn't be as much of a problem. What else then? Well, they said that they're going to shift over to quarterly profession updates. Now, if you're like me, you might think professions, oh, that's like trade skills. No, professions is like your class in WoW or your job. Like Mesmer, Elementalist, Rogue, that kind of thing. So the first major update is dropping June 28th. So it's good to see that stuff is getting some love, though I have heard that some things do actually need a bit of love. Then World vs. World is also being looked at. They've basically had an ongoing plan that they detailed a while ago to polish up the World v World experience. So they're doing work on population, on rewards, and core gameplay systems for that. And that's also on the way. Then there's the actual roadmap that makes things clear. So spring 2022 is going to see 4 challenge mode strike missions, 2 legendary weapon variants, 2 episodes of Living World Season 1, returning festivals, and profession updates. But beyond that, they have committed to doing regular state of the game blog posts. And again, I think this is an example of a company that maybe hasn't always had the best communication, that's now kind of wising up for, how they should be with their community, which I guess is a welcome thing. They also, by the way, did say the next expansion is already in development. So that's good to know, kind of expected to be honest, but it will hopefully assuage some of the fears that people may have had. Because Path of Fire to End of Dragons was 5 years, and some of those were pretty damn painful for the game and its player base. So maybe getting the vibe that won't happen as much, that's important. Taking all of this in then, I think it seems evident that ArenaNet are basically trying to reverse the set of circumstances that led to Guild Wars 2 post-Path of Fire era struggles. Player communications seem to be up and have improved from what I've read. The latest expansion has done well, better than the previous one, and the next one is in development. So it seems like there won't be another 5-year wait. That all seems pretty good. So, in that case, what is the sentiment about the latest expansion? Right, this probably sounds decent so far, but is the new expansion actually good? I'll say from my own subjective, very first impressions of seeing my girlfriend play it, yeah, looks quite beautiful, looks neat. She certainly, from a more casual perspective, enjoyed it a lot. That said, there are some quibbles, once I've researched what the more dedicated community thinks about it. So, some of the zones don't feel like they have as much exploration depth, and the big new city zone, which honestly just impressed the fuck out of me when I saw it first, some do think that it could do with feeling a little bit more populated. Then there's the final zone meta. So these metas are like these big events that happen in the map. And to be honest, from a WoW player's brain, I thought it was extremely cool. The idea you're doing all these things in the map, you trigger a big boss fight, you all have to go in, you all have to do the boss fight. Initially, though, some of its balancing was quite frustrating, so people could be spending, 20, 30, 40 minutes, and their team fails the meta because they can't reach the DPS check, because they can't coordinate properly. That obviously is a pretty rough feeling, and it's one of the inherent problems of trying to push the world content as far as ArenaNet does. So that's evidently ticked off some people. Some then say that the story does rocket forward just a little bit too fast at the back half, that the new mastery tracks aren't always that thrilling or, exciting to unlock, and that there are just some gameplay concerns for some of the new profession content. Aside from those, though, when you look at the audience reviews, and I think a lot of the critics' reviews as well, it is a just nice big slice of Guild Wars 2 content. The zones are generally more interesting and engaging than we see in other MMOs because of the open world content format. The art direction is seriously on point, the narrative is pretty solid, and just the zones are quite fun. So it seems to be, yes, another Guild Wars 2 expansion. But perhaps the big difference here is that players have an increased confidence in ArenaNet's interest and ability to follow through based on the game seemingly getting back on track after the post-Path of Fire lull and the improved communications. And to be honest, you do have to empathize with this game's community. I mean, for the longest time, people just thought Guild Wars 2 fell off after launch, dead game. That's what people thought. They had a really rough time after Path of Fire. And while they're having a rough time in the game, they have all of the news articles about staff leaving and cancelled projects and things not being good at NCSoft. Then they look at the public, the publicly available information about the game's financial returns, and again think, oh shit, am I putting all my time into the wrong MMO? Which is sad, because Guild Wars 2 is the one MMO that really did try to break the mold and be different to World of Warcraft, which I think got so much interest, but then led to a few of their own design concerns. But I suppose you could say that their projects failing and the unfortunate staff cuts that they had to make, they perhaps meant that Guild Wars 2 was the only viable path forward for ArenaNet, and that perhaps that caused them to refocus on their core product, and at least it kind of does seem like that. So that's the state of things in general for Guild Wars 2. Now you're up to date if you haven't really known what's been going on with the game. So I've been playing, now it's time to share a few more of my opinions. So on the whole then, while things look ropey, I do now think that Guild Wars 2 is a safe bet. It's a decent place to put your time into. It is a well-established MMO with a bright-looking future and a design ethos, content layout, and gameplay style that wholly stands out in the industry, meaning that it will be a decently novel experience. Guild Wars 2 has a bright future, and even though I am still in the 2012 content, I am actually having a great time. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So the action mode stuff. I am using action mode with all the camera tweaks, and I'm also using reshade. You can check out a video we published just last week or maybe the week before on my setup there. And I found that it's really honed me in on the gameplay, right? And just when the camera's a wee bit closer to the character, it feels a bit more like an action game. It actually lets the way the Guild Wars 2 literally works in that, like, if you fire a fireball, the fireball has to connect with the enemy. It's just, you often don't feel that because it is like a hotkey game in terms of the control scheme and targeting. But after doing that, like, I just got more aware of enemy swings and telegraphs and stuff. And then when you hit the V key when you're moving, you'll do a dodge roll. So I started doing that more and more as a dual dagger wielding elementalist, and just, little bits of, oh hey, I dodged an attack. And then because there's so much AoE in my kit, there's just been that almost ARPG-like thing of getting a bunch of enemies and AoEing them down while trying to not get yourself globaled that just felt pretty good. So it's that thing where it just has this relaxing gameplay style of, going through, just running through these zones on your big raptor, clearing things out, getting some levels. It's just kind of like a nice chill time, to be honest with you. So I'm having a great time. Once I hit level 80 and get a little bit more in there, because I think I'm about 3. I can't actually remember exactly what my game time is. I think it's like a few days, though, now, of like mostly just sort of chilling and exploring, not really going all giga fast trying to power level or anything. But maybe when I hit like 100 hours, 150, reach another milestone, I'll do another video fully sharing my experience and breaking down how the game is. I will say for endgame, I still have some concerns because, look, I do have a goopy gamer brain. I've played World of Warcraft since, technically since vanilla, but in reality since TBC, and only not as a sniveling idiot since mid to late Wrath of the Lich King. But that still does mean I've got a goopy gamer brain. I'm all about numbers. So the idea that, I hit max level, I get the exotic gear, then, I set in for the long haul of getting ascended gear, and it's just, you can do stuff, earn some gold, do some masteries. You don't level up? You don't increase your item level? I'm just like, I don't know how I'm going to fit into this. I genuinely don't. And that's part of why I'm going to play this game, because I want to see how somebody like me, whose brain has been busted by the traditional way of doing an MMO, how I'm actually going to click with this game. And maybe if that means I can learn something I can bring to you to see if you would actually click with the game. So in terms of things, obviously I did use the level boost that came with my character to make a Path of Fire, make level 80, so I could go into Path of Fire, do the first mission, unlock the Raptor, so I could do Corteria with the Raptor. Yeah, I know, sure, I miss out on a few jumping puzzles just as they were, but fuck it, the Raptor's awesome. I like running around with it, it sparks joy. I think what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to go through Path of Fire for the mounts, and then after that, I'm going to get my Griffin, which will involve doing the Path of Fire, like the later maps, doing quite a bit of that. And man, I really want that Griffin. Certainly the action camera with the Griffin feels really cool. Went on a spin with that with my girlfriend's account. It was fucking awesome. The Griffin is seriously cool. I get the dragon controls more like a World of Warcraft dragon, so it's quite convenient, but I just think the Griffin is so much fun to fly. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then I suppose I'll be checking out End of Dragons. There's lots of people who, I don't know if it's just because of the very first impression, but there's plenty of people who are, drawing Ba Sing Se parallels, in which case I'm like, oh, fucking right, Avatar stuff, let's go. So there you go. Do I think you should try Guild Wars 2? Well, I can't wait until I can come back with some more endgamey perspectives. What I will say, though, is if going through just a sort of a nice immersive world with a different type of gameplay, if that's your thing, you kind of just like running through zones, bumping into things, maybe you like the idea of just sort of getting maximum completion in all of the maps in a game. Yeah, the game really does seem to work at that and work really well. It's just a very cozy game, is what I've experienced. So it's very different to the reasons why I'd go and say raid in World of Warcraft with my guild. So for some people, that'll sound awesome. They'll just like it as a nice game to chill out in. For others, that just won't be interesting. And maybe what I find at endgame will change your mind or change my mind. Maybe it won't, but that's why I'm going to be playing it. Okay, so that's the overall state of Guild Wars 2. It's a game that I'm pretty damn content to put my time into because I do think it actually has the legs. So that's good news. Okay, I hope you found this to be an informative and useful video in guiding your own gaming decisions, and I'll see you next time.